if they felt like the existence of Israel had been put in question, it wouldn't hesitate to use nuclear weapons. I don't think there's any question about that. So that's, yeah, I don't know. That's a terrifying thing. This is, we could see mushroom clouds before long.
Yeah, but that's what I was about to say. Like you say, before long. Like, I don't think people understand how quickly this could potentially escalate. If Iran feels like it has to strike back hard, because they know what's the inevitable conclusion to this. This is going to be where Israel is going to drop a nuke. So maybe we just have to go really hard. So all of a sudden, it could be in a matter of days we're escalating to nuclear weapons. Like it's possible.
It's not impossible. Yeah, no, it's not impossible. Again, Israel is a small country and it's very vulnerable. Iran's a very large country and large population. With the population is like easily 10 times that of Israel. Or you look at the Jewish population of Israel; it's like 12 times that of the Jewish population of Israel, and it's again it's a large country with much of it is mountainous, and they can survive. You can suffer a lot of damage. They've already suffered some significant damage, but that's a large country. Again, sort of similar to Ukraine. And we've talked about how Ukraine, in spite of, actually much more extensive strikes and, much more damage, is still able to fight. Iran's going to be there. And I think, though Israel you have to say that they conducted a very successful first strike, largely due to their version of Operation Spiderweb. The longer this war goes on, if it's just between Israel and Iran, Iran will gain the advantage. They just have more resources, and they have. Okay, Israel could take out these facilities here and there, but there's so much to Iran. There's just think about what happened again with Yemen. The U.S. was never able to. They were able to hide these missiles and fire them again and again. And don't tell me that Iran can't do it. In a war that goes on for a while, a war of attrition, I think Iran will gain the upper hand. The only thing, that I think is worrying for Iran is that because of this Operation Spiderweb, their air defenses were severely damaged, and that's going to make it more difficult for them. I think there's no question about it. But they seem to have enough that, again, I don't think any Israeli aircraft really want to fly over Iran. They still have enough, and maybe they can bring more into play. Maybe they can move the air defense assets around. But that's I think of course the losses of these generals are tragic, losses of life, and not just these generals but their families. There are also a couple of leading scientists that were killed, assassinated. Those are losses for the Iranians, but maybe the more serious in terms of the long-term war is the loss of the air defenses. But still, even so, I think that clearly Iran has the edge and over the long run.
But that means if they have the edge in the long run, like I understand Israel and America were not geared for wars of attrition. So this just means, though, then once they begin to lose this war, Iran survives the initial blow. Basically, that's what the U.S. and Israel are good at. They give a big initial blow, but once we get, bogged down in these wars of attrition, then they start to suffer, and then all of a sudden Israel's up against the wall, and then that just means the nuclear option, right? Like that's the problem. That's the biggest.
Yeah, that's right. That's a very serious problem. I know. It's just like something. Iran has to win, but they have to win short of Israel. Exercising the Samson option. I don't know how they carry that out.
How do you walk that line?
I don't know. I really don't.
I don't think you can. And so this means like if God forbid. But if Israel drops a nuke on Tehran, for example, what does that mean for the world?
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean? What do we do? What does the world do when we see a mushroom cloud in a city and they vaporize a million people or something?
Right. Well, I don't. Yeah. I mean, it's.
God forbid. I really, but I just hate even saying that. I hate even just bringing that up, and I'm sorry for but it's just. I think that. I think that is a possibility, and I don't even like saying that, but I think it's a
Yeah.
very real
Yeah.
possibility.
Right. Well, you certainly hope that there would be more than just condemnation, but there would be real action on the part of the world. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if the U.S. and certain European countries still try to justify it, just as they are justifying this attack. They say, well, Israel, I think Macron just said, and of course, the American officials said, well, Israel has the right to defend itself. Right. They're not defending themselves; they're attacking. This is just
It's
there's
so
no
insane.
defense involved. Or sometimes even RT, you sort of said it was a preemptive attack. There's no reason to even call it a preemptive attack. There was no evidence that Iran was preparing to attack Israel. They were in the midst of negotiations. This was a stab in the back. It was just pure, unprovoked aggression. And yeah, they carried out. I actually just going back to like the Operation Spider Web aspect. There are reports in the Israeli media that actually this had been planned for years. That the Mossad had laid the groundwork for this over the course of years. Had smuggled in these assets, and then more recently the drones and obviously this is another word. I'm talking about the degradation of Iran's air defense. That's one really severe blow, that it's going to be difficult to overcome. I believe they can, but, it's going to be difficult to overcome. The other is just clearly Mossad has infiltrated Iranian society and the government to some extent, similar to what they did in Lebanon. And this is clearly, it was clear that this was a problem that predates this attack, because we saw, for example, the assassination of Haniyeh, is it on the day of the inauguration of Pezeshkian, and that was, that showed again that Mossad had infiltrated, had many assets on the ground there in Iran, and then just recently there was that explosion at the port, which, we don't know for sure, but it seems very highly suspicious. So that's a problem. If we remember what happened in Lebanon is just following that initial attack, that took out Nasrallah and other, high-ranking military officials, and again, hundreds of civilians that nobody ever talks about. It was followed by many other decapitation strikes, successful decapitation strikes, including his replacement. Clearly the Israelis had a network there, and they were collecting real-time intelligence, and they just knew where these people were. Now, that's a worry. I don't know if that's true in Iran right now, but if it is, then they've got a real serious problem. And so it's not, I'm expecting that Iran is going to prevail if this goes on for a while. But we have to admit that Israel has dealt some heavy blows. And if they still have, that network in place, they could continue to do so. This could become, the Iran, or at least I don't think there's any chance like the nation of Iran is not going to survive this, but the government could fall and could descend into chaos before it comes back together. I mean, there is a chance if the Israelis are able to continue, these decapitation strikes. I think it's an outside chance, but it's real. It's not just etched in stone that the Iranians are going to win this. They're up against a formidable enemy supported by, a superpower, and it's going to be a tough fight.
Right. But Iran is also supported by multiple superpowers, China and Russia. Right. And I believe Pakistan as well has, I believe the government has said that, has put its support behind Iran, so Iran has the right to defend itself. Right. Do you see this turning into World War III?
I don't see that happening. I actually don't. I don't think Russia and China will become involved directly. I fully expect that they're going to support them. They unequivocally condemn the Israeli actions, as you would expect. And by the way, in that that IAEA decision, to censure Iran, there were only 3 votes against it, and those were Russia, China, and I think Burkina Faso.
Do you think? How do you think this is going to affect the Ukraine war? Do you think that this is something that Zelensky is happy about and will want to try to expand this into World War III?
I think he's probably unhappy about it. In fact, there have been statements from Ukrainians. I believe a Ukrainian official, or that this is not to the benefit of Ukraine, because first of all, it's going to shift the focus away from Ukraine even more, and then it could, if especially this turns into a long war, it's going to drain weapons from Ukraine. I think there's no question that the U.S., if this war goes on, that the U.S. is going to start diverting, it's going to end supplies to Ukraine, and they're going to send what they have to Israel. And that's not good for Ukraine. I don't think they want this.
Is the thinking for the neocons or government is that, okay, things aren't going too well in Ukraine, so let's start a war with Iran? I mean, well,
no, I don't think so, because they've always wanted this war, long before the Ukraine war began. This is something they just always wanted. So I don't think it's that. It's that, they may be kind of like an added benefit to them, but that's not what they're after. They've just always, had the place the target, the bullseye on Iran, and they've always been, hoping to do what they're doing now,
Yeah, just there's just been so much hawkish rhetoric towards China. Obviously we have this hot conflict going on right now with Ukraine and Russia, very real war happening there. And then we have all these Iran hawks, and then Trump allows Israel to do this. And the tweets that came out from Trump afterwards have not been reassuring. Yeah. I'm not sure if I have one of them here.
Yeah.
I think you've read it. I'll read it anyways, just
right.
Because it's scary. Donald J. Trump says, "I gave Iran a chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest of words to just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told. That the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world, by far. And that Israel has a lot of it, with much more to come. And they know how to use it. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead now. And it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there's still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there's nothing left, and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction. Just do it before it is too late. God bless you all."
Yeah. Well, first of all, that is pretty much an open admission that this is a U.S.-Israeli attack, right? It's just like, I told them, you didn't do it, so the Israelis attacked you. It's not like, okay, the Israelis are just doing what they have to do. I wish they had waited, or, that is actually the line that Secretary of State Rubio expressed actually very recently after the attack began. He just basically said, this has nothing to do with us. We're not involved. This is just something that Israel's doing, because it sees it's necessary for its own defense. But then Trump shot his mouth off right there and just, he made it clear that, oh no, this was, this is part of, essentially, this is a U.S.-Israeli plan. This is something that I saw coming, and that it, was necessary because they weren't accommodating enough in the negotiations. I threatened them, and now look, they didn't listen to my threats. Now, now they're suffering their punishment.
Yeah, I mean, this type of rhetoric saying there's going to be nothing left. Right. It sounds like we're heading for an all-out war, and I just don't. We've talked about how suicidal this is for America. Are you surprised that Trump has gone down this route? I mean, he
Well, I
says
am
he's going to.
yeah, right. I am a little bit. I actually am because I'm not a Trump fan. There's many things that he's done that have I've really disgusted me, like the assassination of General Soleimani during his first term. But you could say, at least with Trump, that he never started a war, an all-out war. Maybe he might have intensified some, supported, continued, but he didn't actually clearly start a new war. I know there's some debate over that, but but this clearly, would be a war that he could have stopped. He said he was going to stop, but he was deeply involved, as those Truth Social posts show. There was another one that followed, that he was, very much involved in initiating. And we're not talking about, 2 months of bombing Yemen, which was bad enough, but we're talking about some, a region-wide war that could have horrific consequences, that could even go nuclear. And he did it. And so I was always willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think that probably, again, his instincts were that it's better to go for a deal. But Trump is just not somebody you can rely on. And he had surrounded himself with these ultra-Zionists and Iran hawks. And I think at some point, I don't know when, but they talked him into it and convinced him that this is something that he had to do. And I was hoping that, the bit of common sense and the healthy instincts that I think exist somewhere in there, would withstand those pressures, but they didn't. And it's really to his everlasting shame.
Oh, okay. So the cat's out of the bag with this. What are you expecting to happen? I mean, do you think that America can extricate itself from this?
Yeah.
No,
well,
right? I mean, how many?
Probably not.
There's like 200,000 American citizens living in Israel. Once. I just feel like this is going to go nuclear, Dad. I feel like it's going to do that. I feel like it's also going to completely bring down the United States, which maybe some of that needs to happen. I hope it's not a violent thing. But if we see the Straits of Hormuz get closed and gas prices shoot up to $20 a gallon, if there's talks about engaging the draft again and conscripting people to actually go to war, if all of a sudden American men and women start coming home in body bags from all these bases are wiped out, our Navy sinks, then what's going to happen? Like domestically, there's going to be riots in the street. Things are going to go insane. There's going to be I just see chaos ahead. Then I see doubling down, then all out war. I see potential for it to expand, and try to, once something's not working well in the Middle East, Ukraine, well, maybe it's time for Taiwan to declare independence and let's start a war over in China. I just see this whole thing blowing up, and I see it blowing up very quickly, and maybe it's because we've been obsessed with this topic and talking about how suicidal a war with Iran would be for the United States and just how horrific it would just be for the global economy. And now it feels like it's actually happening. So are we right at what we said, that this would tank the global economy, will likely turn nuclear? What are we looking at? Millions of people dying, and what's going to happen regionally? Egypt's going to rise up. What's going to happen in Jordan?
Well, it's... by the way, speaking of Jordan, there was a report that the Iranians had retaliated and that they sent some hundreds of drones towards Israel. And then the Israelis, with the help of the Americans, I believe the British and the French and the Jordanians, shot these all down. So again, Jordan is part of this, and I'm sure that their own people are not happy about this. And, so much of it took place in Iraq, and the Iraqi, with people, many of whom are Shia and are very closely allied with Iran, are going to be furious about this. It looks like, it's right. It's just sort of a cauldron that's boiling over, or a powder keg that is now been lit. I mean, I don't see anything good. I mean, because of the initial success and the reasons I just gave, I have to say there's a possibility that Israel, maybe with American help, will win initially anyway. Maybe they'll succeed. I don't think this is going to happen, but they have been more successful with this initial strike. Again, they had laid the groundwork in secret, that in a way that, of course, we couldn't know about, apparently going back years. And this initial strike it did a lot of harm to Iran. Again, I think Iran has got enough resources. It's a large enough country, and that this, like, especially the death of the civilians, is obviously is going to. I think it's going to cause the Iranians to unify rather than to lead a breakup. But there's always a chance. Again, especially if their networks, these Mossad networks, are still in place and they continue with decapitation strikes, that we could have real chaos. And in the short run, anyway, Israel and the U.S. could win. That's a possibility, but that's a horrible consequence right there. And I think in the long run, Iran will come back together anyway, and will be perhaps much more formidable and angry and nuclear armed. But then there's the other possibility. If Iran, if we go into a war of attrition and Iran starts to win, then we're faced with the Samson option. People will start talking about it. Right now they don't, but they will, and because it's going to become an obvious possibility. And then, American participation, which I think is going to be hard to avoid, is going to put American assets at risk. And, again, like you're going to see, a real American losses and humiliations. Those are all a possibility. None of it's good. It's all very bad. I just don't, it's just, this is really an awful, turn of events, but it's something that we've been kind of expecting that it was going to happen at least at some time. It kind of took me by surprise that it happened so quickly. I thought at least it would be Sunday, and I think that's what the Iranians were thinking too.
Okay. Do you think a nuclear weapon is going to be used within a year?
I'll just say, I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but there's a real possibility that, and if it's going to be used anywhere in the world, it's going to be used by Israel in the Middle East. It's a real possibility. I mean, we're not talking about some sort of far-fetched turn of a sequence of events, that a black swan event or anything like that. It's just looking at where this is heading. It's you can conceive of all kinds of futures, and a lot of those futures seem to end with the Samson option. That's all I could say. I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but it's something that I think we should be worrying about, truly worrying about more than what might happen in Ukraine. It's not that we should worry about that too. I mean, the possibility of something going nuclear there exists, but I don't think you have nearly the as great a risk as we've seen in the Middle East. And again, it's because of this country, Israel, that it's just shown that it is reckless, and it will, if it feels that it's threatened. Even when it's not threatened, it's very reckless. And now if it's truly threatened, I don't think they're going to have any compunction about using those weapons, which they clearly have.
If Israel uses a nuclear weapon, is that the end of Israel?
I think I don't know, because the problem is, again, I can just see our government and like the governments of France and Germany and the UK making excuses, say, oh, this is very regrettable, but, Israel had to do this. And, but I don't think the vast majority of the world's citizens and many people in those countries are not going to buy it. And it's just going to be further increase, the anger, the real disgust that most people now feel for Israel. And even if the U.S. doesn't take the steps, I think that you're going to see some real measures, if they're not military, but like economic measures, real sanctions from countries like China that can really hurt Israel. I think that you'll see those going forward if they take that step, at least, And then there is a chance too, I think a very real chance, that you'll have revolutions in places like Egypt and Jordan, and then, Israel will find that it's besieged on its own borders.
Right. I think Netanyahu is saying this is a decisive moment in Israeli history.
Right.
I think they know that this is it. This is an existential war between Iran and Israel with likelihood of inflaming, enlarging into bringing the United States, other
Well, clearly Israel is trying to do that. You had Rubio, at least, who was trying to put distance between the U.S. and Israel. But the Israelis themselves are saying that, the Americans have been working closely with us. And there's a reason they say that is because they do want to draw the Americans in. They do want, because I think they figure that in the long run, this is a war that they can't actually win, even, in spite of their initial success. In the long run, they really don't have the resources. They certainly can't go after those, a lot of the facilities, if those are real targets. It's only the American bombers. It's not clear that the American bombers can do it, even with their 2,000-pound, bunker buster bombs. But potentially they could, at least damage a number of some of those facilities. The Israelis clearly cannot.
Mm. I feel like in the minds of people like Donald Trump and European politicians like Geert Wilders, is that this is, they justify it by saying that this is kind of a civilizational battle. And I think probably in the minds of Trump, seeing, what's happening in the LA protests, riots, however you want to categorize it, and this constant Fox News stream of anti-Semitism and the rise of the Islamification of the United States. And this feels like a battle, and I could see it kind of being joined together in Trump's mind. That, we got this problem with, all these illegals and the Islamification, and we got to sort of purify it. And this battle here in the United States extends over to Israel. It's the same battle that they're fighting perhaps in his mind, and that this is, I'm just trying to see how we could, how he, that Trump could be adopting this position. Of course, I know his son-in-law, he's been a hardcore Zionist. It's just so counter to U.S. interest. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you're probably right. There's obviously a lot of kind of mushy thinking, and I see it all the time. There's kind of like an effort to conflate the left in general with, with Hamas and Iran, and these are completely separate issues. Obviously they're not. They're not all on the same team, but in the minds of a lot of American conservatives, they are.
Yeah,
it's all the same battle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's. I don't know what to say. I think we just have to pray for the region, and I hope that it can de-escalate. But I don't think it's possible. And so now it's just the cat's out of the bag. We're talking about that. In a way, this was sort of the inevitable conclusion, is that this war was going to happen. Netanyahu and Israel had made that clear, that this was the end goal. And then it just all accumulated after October 7th and Netanyahu's legal problems and the political unrest within Israel itself to maintain power. It's like, this is it. This is the one chance. Public opinion's turning against the United States and Israel. Here it is. We were losing power. Mm-hmm. It's time for the big grand melee, and we'll come out on top. And when we do, then, our enemies will pipe down and we'll establish dominance. I think that is the mindset. And it's just such a poorly calculated move to make. And we've had so many examples of how poor this decision is. We've just been witnessing the Ukraine war. You see our ability to project power is limited. You see what happened in the Red Sea with the Houthis. Our ability to project power doesn't exist there anymore. We see economically via the trade war with China that economically we can't do this. Morally, what's happened in Gaza, it's like we don't have any justification. There's not the drive. This is just going to end in chaos, riots on the streets, probably millions of people dead, and unfortunately, I think nuclear weapon being used, and the end of the state of Israel after this is all said and done. Like this is the powder keg. It's been lit. This is. I hope I'm wrong. Really hope I'm wrong, but I think that's what we're looking at.
Well, I hope you're wrong too, but I'm not sure that you're wrong. Not at all, unfortunately.